Okay, I think
Start.
the recording started. Okay, yeah, hi. Thanks for the opening keynote by Ajit. I think everyone feels much stronger now on how to deal with this pandemic situation. Okay, now welcome to the C-level keynote panel, right? And today's topic for the C-level keynote panel is about embracing business. Sorry, I need to have my, sorry. Okay, so welcome to the C-level keynote panel, right? Today's C-level keynote panel topic is about embracing business resilience in challenging times. How can you adjust and adapt your ways of working, communication with customers, and brand relationships to emerge stronger from the current crisis? Right, so this is a very long title itself, right? But basically, I think everyone is changing the way of working, right? Work from home, WFH. I mean, people are joking about this term that it can mean work 15 hours. So I'm sure many of us are working longer hours at home because people are feeling that you don't need to travel, and then we'll just slot in even meetings during lunchtime and late nights because things become so, you are so used to it that you just slot in and then you can conduct meetings, right? And of course, communication with customers is quite different now. You don't get to see your customer face to face. So how do you actually still maintain the relationship with them? People, I mean, especially in Asia, there is a lot of face time, face value needed, right? If you don't get to see your customers, right, there's this typical thing of out of sight is out of mind, right? Can you really still maintain a good relationship with customer in a virtual online world? Right. I think today's topic is very interesting, right? There's a big digital disruption, much bigger than ever, right? People are saying that it's not the CEO, not the CTO, not the CIO who actually drive and accelerate digital transformation, but actually is the C19, COVID-19, right? So it's a very interesting topic. Today we have actually three speakers, yeah, together with me to actually discuss with you about this very interesting phenomenon due to the pandemic situation. A very quick introduction of myself, right? I'm currently an executive education fellow in the School of Computing in National University of Singapore. So that's what I actually do. And of course, I'm also leading a few other portfolios, right? And this is Jim here. Okay, so welcome to our all-star panelists. You have Devashish, Suzy, and Xiu Ting. And I'll let them introduce themselves, right? Devashish, over to you.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Good morning or good evening from me. My name is Devashish Saxena. I'm the Vice President and Chief Digital Officer at PPG Industries, based here in Pittsburgh in the US.
Thanks, Devashish. Suzy?
Hi, good morning. My name is Suzy. I head up digital and marketing in Fuji Xerox, and I'm based out of Singapore. Happy to be on the panel and to meet all of you virtually.
All right, thanks, Suzy. Xiu Ting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Xiu Ting. I'm the VP and Global Head of Marketing Strategy and Planning for the print category in HPE. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Xiu Ting. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, all the panelists, for your introduction. So let's start this discussion, right, about digital interruptions. Okay, so the agenda today, before we go down to the questions, right, I think, again, everyone knows that it's still uncertain, although we have accelerated digital disruption, digital transformation, or whatever that you call it, right? But it's still very uncertain because how long is this pandemic going to last, right? And how is it going to be shaping the entire industries? You have SME, you have many traditional businesses and manufacturer distributors who are not so profound in e-commerce. They are all trying to go into e-commerce. Singapore government is giving lots of financial assistance for businesses to go into e-commerce or online so that they can continue their business, right? We just opened up phase 1 last week in Singapore, in June in Singapore. And some businesses are still so-called locked down or closed down and cannot conduct businesses, right? Many of the businesses need to move online before they can continue. So how are these different businesses dealing with this unparalleled e-commerce technology that is changing how we work and how the whole supply chain and inventory management is ongoing? So let's hear from the experts here, right, who actually have their own experience and also experiences with their customers. And followed by this, we will have a Q&A session with the audience. Okay, let's go with the first questions that maybe we will welcome all the panelists to give your inputs, right? So what are the specific problems do these changing economic conditions pose for you? And to what extent has the coronavirus impacted brand and communication strategy to date? Maybe I can welcome Devashish to start first.
Sure.
What is happening in the US? Yeah, very interesting view.
Yeah, well, I think to a large extent, there's a lot of similar challenges that many organizations face around the world. Perhaps the timing of those challenges varies depending on when the individual markets sort of go through the cycle of the pandemic. So just to back up and short introduction on PPG, we are a global paint and coatings company. So we coat everything from the walls around you to airplanes, cars, and pretty much everything, right? I mean, if it has a coating, we coat it, right? So it's a very broad and global environment. So from a business level, what that does when you're in a global environment is that it sort of you hit. Well, what we have found is that we have hit the crisis in different markets at different times, right? So we hit it early in China. We sort of hit it a little bit later in Europe and then in US, and now we're seeing it come to life, for example, in a Latin American market. So we've also seen the impact vary based on the businesses, right? So whereas some of our businesses were quite severely impacted in sort of the peak. If you think about automotive OEM, aerospace, those industries where our customers just stopped making cars, or our customers stopped, planes are all parked in airports. That's going to have an impact from a negative perspective on our business. On the other side, we have businesses like what we call our architectural business, which is painting walls, where we've actually seen part of that business doing quite well, because when everybody's stuck at home, all those home projects that we never could get to, suddenly we start getting to them, and so we've seen an increased demand from our retail sector, from sort of the DIY audience, right? The folks that are coming in and now repainting their living rooms and their family rooms and so on and so forth. So I think, of course, and if I were to go a little bit more personal, Jim, I would say, and you mentioned it in your intro, right? We all recognize that this crisis has accelerated an already increasing digital transformation, and with any such acceleration, there's always I think there's a good and a not so good side to it, right? When the acceleration is planned, you're prepared for it. When it just happens, you're not necessarily prepared for it. So really, I think what it's done for me and for a digital perspective at PPG is it's really it really put us in a space where we had to demonstrate our nimbleness, right? How quickly could we move to changing market circumstances, to changing customer behaviors because of the changing market circumstances, which changed their demands and or needs, and our ability to serve them was constantly evolving based on what actions we may or may not be taking in terms of who's available and who's not. And then we had to balance that against, okay, what sort of digital readiness do we have in different markets and different businesses that we could bring to the table? How could we quickly adapt some things and put some things in place when there was absolutely nothing? And how could we do that in a very quick manner? So I would say that, coming down that funnel from market to PPG to digital, for us, that's kind of been sort of the key areas where I've at least seen impact.
Sure. Yeah, so I believe you're saying that definitely you need to have different strategy for different market, right? You are global market handling, and everyone is at different level of either shutdown or opening up, right? And also all of them are at different level of digital maturity, right?
Yeah.
So definitely you have different strategy that you need to deal with. And it's not easy because you can't really plan. You don't know who is going to lock down first or opening up first.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Devashish. We'll discuss more on that later on
Sure.
as well. What about Susie? What is happening to, let's say, Fuji Xerox with your customer as with your partners?
Right. So, maybe a little bit sort of contextual reference, right, for those in the audience who may not be, as familiar with what our business is, right, at Fuji Xerox. So we think of ourselves as being in the business of helping companies in their transformation journey in terms of translating from paper intelligence to digital, right? So our heritage is really in document management, right? And it's interesting because we believe that, especially at this point in time, we're actually uniquely positioned to be able to help companies translate, the intelligence that resides in paper and documents into information that enables business to make smarter decisions by looking at digital processes, by looking at digital workflows, right? So Fuji Xerox, we ourselves have embarked on a transformation journey, for the past 2 to 3 years, right? And it is about working with our customers to monetize, right, from intelligence in paper into digital. So when COVID-19 sort of, reared its head, right, I would say, in the early part of this year, it basically at an organizational level, right, it actually accelerates, right, the need for us ourselves to transform quickly in terms of offerings, in terms of how we partner with the ecosystem, and therefore it has, put the whole transformation for us as an organization, I would say on steroids, right? So in the last few months, we've been partnering with many other partners in ecosystems in terms of how do you sign, documents online, how do you do contract lifecycle management remotely, and work within the constraints of the regulations, right? So that's at an organizational level, right? Then at the brand and comms level, again, COVID-19, has reinforced our narrative, right? Because our narrative is that we help organizations transform from what I describe as the small d to the big D, right? So what is a small d? Because when you look around us, right, whether it's in Singapore or many parts of the world, many SMBs, right, in terms of their data storage and information, is still in different file formats, right? Whether it's Excel, PDF, paper, or otherwise, right? Different document types, right? So our narrative is, hey, all the more, right, we can help you digitize your information and all that. I mean, you can talk about software as a service and blockchain, all that is very sexy stuff, right? But until you get your data and information in a format that you can manage and retrieve and monetize, everything else is just, a dream, right? So especially during COVID-19, when things are done remotely and all that, our narrative in terms of helping companies move from the small d, digitize your stuff, to the big D, which is digitalization of your work processes and workflow, has become even more important, right? And therefore, Jim, in your opening comment, right, who is the biggest propeller of change, right? Is actually COVID-19, right? Because before that, people say, okay, do I really need to digitize? Is it an investment I need and all that, right? But so COVID-19, from our perspective, has become the single biggest push in terms of convincing the skeptics, right, to get onto the bandwagon. So from that perspective, it has really put up the ante for the game, whether it's at an organizational level, because our core business is in equipment, right? So when people work from home, guess what? Printing revenues go down, right? So where is the shift, right? So that's how we're working with companies to navigate and accelerate that shift in terms of where we're at.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. That's interesting because I used to teach digital transformation in university.
Right.
So I think many people still do not understand the difference between digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. So I'm very glad that you mentioned Yeah, we definitely can talk a lot about that, right? People are
Yes,
still
yes.
everything and think that I just put something online is digital,
Yeah,
but it's not as so simple
super.
as that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, very interesting to hear from your view from Fuji Xerox, right? Definitely, I remember the days where we are using your company solutions for printing
Right,
services. But
right,
things
right.
have changed and a lot of digitalization with your company as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we can hear the view from Xiu Ting as well from HPE because you definitely is a supplier to also many businesses, right? And how do you actually work with them and also, of course, your customer themselves? Yeah.
Yeah, I think first of all, let me just talk very broadly on how we are seeing the trends impact from a customers, partners, and communities perspective, and really coming from a perspective and from a brand and comms standpoint. I mean, give a bit of context. I've got 23 years of experience, not just from tech, but also from consumer goods itself. So I think starting with really understanding how the insights and the human emotions evolve is actually, the starting point of how we looked at pivoting our strategies. So I think, like what Devonish say, I think first of all, how you access the market, how you talk to the customers is totally disrupted. Everything pivots straight into e-commerce online, and at different stage of different markets, we're at different level of capability. So that's one big shift. The second big shift is also really around the impact of COVID on the customer's perspective and actually on a human individual standpoint. We speak about every one of us are actually working from home now and actually dealing with, home-based learning in Singapore about 24 hours in that sense. So from a way the brands, people are looking at brands now, that there's a whole notion about cocooning. So everything is about, cocooning in a human standpoint, and that actually raised a lot of interesting insights on how consumers are actually, a bit more skeptical about brand now, but also looking at brands, sharing their point of view and actually help them cope with this phase as a very key pivotal point in essence. And then the third piece is also how partners and communities is actually seeking brands and companies to really play a different role in essence. And then the last piece is also how, as marketers ourselves, needs to really evolve in terms of pivoting our strategies quite quickly. So I would say that from HP perspective, the first phase was, really pivoting our strategies to really help customers, communities, and partners adapt into the situation. HP purpose, is really all about using the technology to help the humanity of people, helping our customers in itself, and really to adapt to the current situation. So when COVID happens, we went into a couple of different programs. For example, we've launched a print, play, and learn program, which is really helping the mothers and the parents, equipping them with content and printables to help them cope with the home-based learning. So beyond just the product itself, but the whole content collaboration piece as one of them. The second area, we also went quite straight into communities, helping communities. So our 3D department actually work with medical hospitals companies that actually help provide, equipments that help with the healthcare customers and help them really adapt in itself. And also at different parts of the world, we're helping, the B2B or the small medium business, providing them with the right equipment and laptop and also the financial assistance so that they tide through this. So we've gone through this phase of, adapting, helping the customers adapt to this current situation. We're moving into the next phase of really looking at how do we then, pivot our strategies to continue to really stay relevant. And at the heart of it, at the heart of everything is really at the core of what we learn from the customer insights, listening on the ground, and what does purpose and the brand stand for from a purpose standpoint, so that we stay really anchored on the current situation.
Right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Yutin. That's very interesting, yeah, to hear from you the different help that you have extended to your customers, ranging from healthcare, print services, and many others. So very interesting, yeah. And definitely you have pointed out very clearly this entire coronavirus or pandemic situations is impacting all industry. No one is spare of, yeah. Okay, very good, very interesting. Thanks for the opening questions, right, from all the panelists. Let's try to look at the next question, right? So how can you ensure your business caters to customer needs and maintain steady communication to sustain a long-term relationship with your customers? I think all three panelists, you have kind of mentioned how you kind of help your customers, right? So maybe in this part, we can focus more on a long-term thing, because we all know that this pandemic is not going to just go away very soon, right? It's going to last for a while. And the after effect of that is going to be quite drastic. So how do we actually maintain a long-term relationship with customers? Maybe we can hear from Susie first, right? Especially Fuji Xerox herself is transforming from a traditional print services to a digital services. And most of your customers, I believe, like myself, have been in long-term relationship with you, right? So how do you actually bring them across the entire journey with this digital transformation?
So I think, right, the way we look at it is really what we would describe as the inward game and the outward game, right? I think the inward game is really about what is core, right? What is core to the business, right? So I would describe it as a human at the core, right? In terms of how we actually engage with our employees, right? So with COVID-19, the entire, three-quarters of the organization of the world population is working from home, right? So how do we actually enable our employees, right? Because health and safety has now become paramount, right? We're talking about interaction points that it's safe, right? So when we look at an inward game lens, we look at our employees and say, how do we ensure that we have a customer experience that is delightful, that can woo, wow, and win them, but at the same time, making sure that our employees' well-being is looked after. Because I think when it comes to we always say that actions speak louder than words, right? My favorite phrase is that, don't tell me you're funny, make me laugh, right? So how are we treating our employees? Our inward game is very important in terms of how we're anchoring it, right? So, over the longer term, in terms of how do we even equip our salespeople to sell remotely, right? What is the automation is required in order for them to, reduce order processing time in order to be effective, right? So many dimensions along the inward game as it relates to employees that we need to basically ensure that we are walking the talk, right? Then when you flip the other side in terms of customer experience, how do we ensure, as I said, right, a customer experience that is safe, right, that minimize contact, that is optimized, okay? How do we ensure that, given that we, pretty much live in a VUCA world, what are the flexible, payment models, right? Because the specific sectors that are affected by COVID-19, aviation, F&B, hospitality, right? It's very easy to say, well, with you, we help you and all that, right? But how is that being translated, right, into the business relationship in terms of whether it's pricing models, payment terms, and stuff like that, right? So I think, what COVID-19 has really shown us is that it's, in the traditional way of doing business, right? It is win-win, and, and you sort of maximize shareholders' value and the whole, whole nine yards, right? But with COVID-19, it's really about how do we work together, right, to ensure that we both can survive, right, and can ride over the situation that we're in, right? So it's about give and take. It's about how, businesses can help, and as Suti pointed out, right, communities as well, right? So I see that as a combination of getting our inward game, from act correct, so that we can ace, right, in our outward game. But at any point in time, right, there is this balance in terms of a win-win, but not necessarily in the traditional sense. But I think at this point in time, navigating during the crisis. We're talking about basic survival, right? How many businesses are going to stay in place given liquidity and solvency issues? I mean, there is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the drugs that are going through clinical trial, but this is going to be for the long haul.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. So yeah, thanks for that. They're very good points. Yeah, and I'm sure Devashish and Shooting has points to add as well after hearing from you on the first questions. Yeah, but I mean, we have limited time for this panel, so I definitely want to welcome you for more insights. But maybe we move on to the next question where we can look at it from another angle as well. Yeah. So the next question is about what's the core message and position brands should be endeavoring to convey to customers right now, and how can you attempt to deliver it? So again, in the first questions, I believe all three panelists have shared some of this, right? But again, let's extend further, right? What exactly that you actually do it with your customers? Maybe we can hear from Devashish.
Sure. I think in some ways the basic tenets of communicating stay the same, right? It's about being communicating in an honest way with a sense of integrity and being upfront, right? And if anything, I think even more so in times of crisis and uncertainty. So I would say that we accept the uncertainty. We accept that we don't know all the answers. I just like our customers don't, and comes down to recognizing that our customers are not necessarily looking for us to answer all their questions, but really they're looking for somebody that they can partner with in these times, because as I mentioned earlier, and as everybody's been saying, things are changing so much that it's that trust and that partnering relationship that I think allows us and our customers to navigate that uncertainty. And the other thing I would say, and it sort of ties to the previous question a little bit, right? I mean, one of the things that this allows us to do as we move into the future is maintain that tightness with customers, because we've all talked about how much things have accelerated. But I know one of the things I'm looking to understand is how much of that is going to stick and how much of that will revert back. I mean, just personally, I'm telling you that we're ready to go out and eat at restaurants and do a lot of things. So just because I'm behaving in a certain way right now doesn't mean I'm going to behave like that as things start to open back up. And I think that's going to apply to our customers in a business setting too. So I think staying tight and creating a transparent communication with your customers allows you to do the right thing today, but also allows you to do the right thing tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, Devashish. I totally agree with you. It's trust and honesty, being open to the customers, because I remember my company also supplies medical PPE, right? We take from suppliers from China, from Taiwan, and then we supply to even US, Colombia. So definitely the open and trust to the customer is very important, because customer keep on asking us how come the shipment is delayed and all those things. I mean, logistics, supply chain, then there are policy changes with the pandemic situation changes, right? You have approved list, non-approved list. There's so many things that's changing on the fly, almost every hour, every day. The pricing is also changing. So the only thing we can do is be open, right? Be a trusted partner of the customers. Then we can maintain the relationship. Yeah, definitely, because there's so much that we can answer, but it's changing so fast that nobody knows everything, right? You can't really plan it. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, thanks for that. Shooting, you have anything you want to add on from your perspective?
Yeah, I would think that purpose is critical. And being really anchored on purpose is what customers are really looking for. with, anxiety, survival, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, whether we are, an employee in a certain customer, or we're SMB owner or itself. I think we're actually seeking, brands and businesses to, to actually give us a point of view on what we are in for, and also how do we pivot our purpose in a way that it helps them really provide adaptation to the current situation. And like what Devinish say, it's critical to really be authentic in the way you communicate, so as to really build trust, because being a partner with them and being really anchored on purpose and pivoting your purpose in a way that what your brand and your business really stands for is even more critical. So I would see that, that's how brands, should really go out and actually help customers adapt with a clear point of view on what they stand for in an authentic way.
Yeah, Jim, I want to add to that because I completely agree. I mean, I think staying on purpose and accentuating that, for us, our purpose is, we say, is to protect and beautify the world. And we've been able to take the protect aspect of that and pivot into, as Shooting was saying, into creation and pushing a lot of protective kind of products, right? Antibacterial, antiviral kind of coatings that can suddenly have a relevant say in terms of what's happening in the market. So I think that's a great point about purpose.
Yeah, I think both of you brought out a very good point. The phrase trusted brand. Maybe 20 years ago, trusted brands means your product can last for 20, 30 years. But now the trusted brand really is how open you are with your customers and how transparent you are, and also build the trusted partnership things. Yeah. Okay, definitely. Nice. So maybe in view of time, let's move on to the next question, right? The next question talks about anticipating operational impacts. How can you adapt your messages to reflect the on-the-ground realities while staying true to the brand's values? I think both Devashish and Shooting also shared just now about the trust, the openness, and all those things. Maybe Susie, you want to add on a few points here?
Yeah, so definitely, right? In terms of the authenticity, right, of the brand. So today we're talking about tensions, right? There's the tension of the economic survival of businesses, of companies on one hand, right? And then we also recognize that there are economic hardships that are being faced at an individual level, right? Whether it's job cuts, job losses, furlough situation. And then compounding this, right, is that need to be sensitive, right, to health and safety of individuals in general, right? So the juggling of all these tensions, I think it brings home the point that yes, as a brand, as a company, we need to be authentic, and also in terms of how we communicate, right? It has got to be relevant, right? So don't pretend something that you're not, right? So from our perspective, what have we tried to do? We know that SMEs, right, when they struggle from working from home, right, we offer free, IT concierge service, right? How do you get your basic network set up, right? And how do you even, do your stuff, right? Working from home versus in the office, right? So I think brands need to look at what it is, what is in their truck, right? What is a plethora of stuff that may be relevant in a situation like that, right? So when I think about this, I also think about what we should not do, right? So one thing that comes to mind is hashtag Black Lives Matter, right? So in the whole week, when the situation erupted in the US, right, we see many brands putting on their social media, right, black screens, right? And, I don't mean this as a criticism, right? But I think it's more than just, empathizing and say, okay, hashtag All Lives Matter and all that, right? But, what is the company's diversity and inclusion posture, right? Before we do something like that. So that I don't know whether you guys have read this. There's a person who wrote a blog, and he basically said, right, that companies should tweet the change that they want to be, right? It's like walk the walk and tweet the tweet. Don't say something that you're not. So I think there's that fine line, right? That we may want to, brands may want to jump into the bandwagon, but I think it goes down to your core values, being human at the core, because this is a health crisis. And being authentic about what you can actually do as a brand, as a company, to provide value, to the customers and to the community. That's, how I would sort of look at how we can be sustainable in the longer term.
Yeah, thanks. Shooting or Devashish, you want to add on your points? More on the operational impact side, definitely.
I think I would add that agree a lot with what Susie is saying, but I think on the operational impact, this is where digital plays a really critical role. Pivoting, utilizing digital tools and processes to really have the right social listening on the ground. And actually giving us that agility to adapt our messages in a right way becomes even more critical. So as we really help adapt our message accordingly. And one of the great examples is that we no longer can do physical events in our industries. Key launches itself, events are really critical. Our team has really totally pivoted into virtual events, just like now virtual webinars, but virtual events itself. How do we adapt that in essence? And then I think the most important thing is, I think, being a marketer here is that the importance for marketer to really lead from the front, be the customer voice, be the brand voice, and actually start integrating together with the sales force on actually adapting your operational messages very, very nimbly is going to be critical as we get to, stay relevant in the current situation. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So maybe in view of the time, let's kind of conclude with the last questions. Yeah, if we may, right? So maybe everyone takes 1 to 2 minutes, and then we can look at this one, right? How can you continuously adapt your marketing plan, right? Whether it's the best, worst, or moderate case scenarios to anticipate possible and likely changes, right? And take alternative actions. So maybe we can just conclude this webinar in this manner, right? What do you, either as a person or in a company or together with your partners and customers, how are you going to make changes, yeah, in your businesses, in the way that you communicate, in your marketing branding strategy, right, in view of this pandemic situation? Yeah, I mean, maybe I open to the floor. Yeah, we can start with either of you first.
I can go first.
Yeah, sure,
I would say that on the personal front and also on the business front, looking at this crisis as an opportunity. In Chinese saying, we look at the Chinese word 危机, actually means in the crisis as really an opportunity in itself. So I think, versus seeing half glass, you've got to flip the pivot now and literally say, how do we actually, look at the crisis and really adapt differently? I think 3 key ingredients is important, and I don't think that I can't profess that I'm an expert at that. I'm learning every day itself. I think empathy, agility, and creativity becomes even more critical. I think empathy, just from the perspective of constantly listening on the ground on how to really adapt your changes. I think this is a real time also really about agility in the way we operate, agility in the way of always having a plan B and plan C, but also agility from a leadership standpoint is a real test of every one of us. And I think, creativity on how we really lead from the front and actually take a crisis as an opportunity to pivot your strategy and your brands, even become more critical. I mean, these are the 3 P's that I'm really guiding my team and actually learning on a daily basis.
Yeah, thanks, Yuting.
Yeah, maybe I can pick up on that term agility, because I think of it as exercising strategic agility, right? How can we, most of us, most organizations are trying to understand how we can use this crisis as an opportunity to come out stronger, right? How do we come out stronger on the other side? Which means, what are some changes that perhaps we have made that we thought were short-term that we should be thinking about accelerating? What are some changes that we made or we should pull back on? you know, where should we take advantage of the acceleration opportunities that have happened to, and the environment has been created that does allow us to keep pushing. Like I use digital as an example for me and for us at PPG. But I think that's really one of the key things is, and I tie that back to what we said, which is one of the ways we can ensure that we come out of this strong on the other side and still stay relevant is that we come out mapping to customer expectations and behavior, right? At the end of the day, if you're able to continue to do that, but continue to do that in a exponentially more effective manner, then I think that will, then you could look back and say, hey, you know what, we were able to put the word opportunity into how we managed our journey through this crisis. So that's again my 2 cents. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Devashish.
Yeah.
And thanks. Yeah, Susie,
If I
you want
may
to?
add, right? Yeah, I think definitely agree, right, with the qualities that Suting and Devashish talked about, right? I think the challenge that, you know, I think, or rather the key is that to be, you know, many people have said, don't put COVID-19 as a crisis. Don't waste it, you know, don't waste it, right? We cannot come out of it doing the same things as before. We must learn something, right? So I think as leaders in terms of navigating this change, you know, whether it's now post-COVID, right, is, you know, what are the behavioral norms, right, that we must seek to establish? Because organizations at the end of the day, right, are based on measured outcomes, right? So measurements drive behavior, right? So what are the behavioral norms and what are the measurements that we're going to put in place, right, in order to drive the right behavior? Because if we say that, oh, you know, we need teams to be agile and all that, right? I think it must be supported, right, in terms of the measurement framework, in terms of behavioral norms that we're cultivating, in order, you know, to cultivate and bring to the fore these attributes. Without a question, these are the, you know, essential attributes that we must have in the world that we're in. I think the challenge for organizations is it has got to do with very deeply rooted cultures, behavioral norms, measurement systems, and all that, and that, you know, needs to be actively worked at, right, in order that we may be able to see, you know, the qualities that we all know are the must-haves. Yeah, so that's how I would look at it.
Thanks, Susie. Yeah, so very interesting sharing by all my 3 star panelists for this panel, really. Yeah, you have shared from how you deal with your customers, right, your partners, your suppliers, right, the entire ecosystem. And I think I kind of concluded that trusted partnership, right, is a new phrase, right, although it's an old wordings, right, new phrase that we really need to live in this new normal world. Yeah, and very thank you again. Yeah. And I hope that everyone else have enjoyed the panel as well. I hope that this can be longer, but that's where we have until today, right? I think after this, people can drop you emails as well as inquiries. Yeah. Thanks again. Yeah. Thanks for the morning panel together with us. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much, Jim.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Jim. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.